Hey
Hello.
y'all. I was joking about starting our last episode like that, so I decided to do this one. Anyway, today I think this is a very special episode because we're going to be talking about the origin story of Volunteer Matters, and we have the one and only Mark Hopwood here, who is the president of Volunteer Matters, but also one of its co-founders. So he's deeply connected with the company's beginnings, their roots, and he's been with Volunteer Matters from day one. So Mark just has a wealth of knowledge, and I'm really excited to ask him some questions. We're going to do an interview style.
Fun.
So, all
I had
right,
zero
ready?
prep work for this. I just get to answer questions.
Most important question, LeBron James or Michael Jordan? No, kidding.
Michael Jordan, hands down, no questions
Okay.
asked.
I'm gonna start a fight in the comments, but okay, so let's start with the beginning of Volunteer Matters. It makes sense. What inspired you to start the company?
Well, back in the day, we were actually a custom software development shop doing business for like Fortune 1000 companies where we were building products for them. This is back in the day. So remember, we started Volunteer Matters 21 years ago. So this is back in like the dot-com boom days. And we did a or pro bono job for gay men's health crisis in New York City. And I forgot how we got linked up with them. It was through a friend of mine, and we ended up doing this project. And they wanted to, at the time, just have what we all take for granted now as like a WordPress website. But at the time, it was like WordPress didn't exist. This was like pre all of that sort of stuff. And they wanted to be able to get valuable information out to the people that they were serving. And they wanted people to be able to submit requests and to be able to gain access to healthcare and certain resources and whatnot. And so the very first thing that they asked us to do was just a pro bono gig to do research on what tools, utilities, software frameworks were available to do that for them. And at the end of that project, I was just flabbergasted at how little there was on the market that were within reach for most nonprofit organizations. And so when we first started, we were like, we should. There were these platforms that were out there that would cost the licensing just for the product to start building something were hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like there was this one platform called BEA back in the day, and it was like $300,000 a year, or $300,000 one time, I forget.
Oof.
And yeah, it wasn't a. It was this was like at the very beginning of like subscription-based software model. And so that clearly would be well out of reach for any nonprofit. And so we said, we could do something that's a light version of this as a product and offer it to nonprofits. Um, and I think the thing that really inspired us to start the company, though, was kind of like we were really good at building products. Like I'm not going to lie, I won't try to act humble. Like we're really good at building products, but not but I mean the products we build would be great and everybody would be very happy with them, and we love doing it. We love finding like complex business problems and coming up with solutions that seemed super simple but under the covers was really handling a lot of intricate things. And in the end, when we took on a project to do that that was actually designed to help people, and I'm a capitalist, don't get me wrong, but when we designed a product, we were like designing a product to actually make the world a better place rather than sell a product or position something. It just felt right. Um, and so that's what sort of sparked us to start it.
Amazing. So, what was the initial problem you aimed to solve for nonprofits?
It was really like a lot of website stuff to begin with. It was, people didn't have manageable content where they could put new articles up or list things on a calendar. Um, have a directory of their volunteers. And so when we're basically just like getting content out there, even just having, it's funny, even back then, just having like a login to the website where there would be stuff just there for their volunteers that other people couldn't get to. I mean, it sounds so simple today, but it was like a big deal back then, all those years ago. And so the initial problem was just getting the right information to the right people without it being accessible for the entire world to see.
I feel like now, I mean, the problem that's not really the main problem that we saw would, right?
Well,
It's
it's
different.
like Yeah, no, it's much more enhanced. It's like everything else. It's like that would barely scratch the surface of what we would want to do. Now we want to automate everything that the volunteers are doing and their schedules and their time tracking and communications and, all of that. So if you were to break things down into its most rudimentary thing, it would be like we want to log in and then people can see what the calendar is, right? That
Okay.
was like the big thing to start. And so that was a big deal way back when, whereas today that would be the absolute bare minimum.
Right. Cool. So what were the first few steps that you took to turn your idea of Volunteer Matters into reality? It wasn't even called Volunteer Matters. It's
It
called
wasn't.
something else.
Yeah, we actually had um, we had well the parent company is Closerware. So sometimes if people see their invoices and stuff, it'll say Closerware LLC. And then the product is Volunteer Matters. But back then the product was Closerware. And so people were subscribing to Closerware. And we had these different modules that you could add on to your subscription. So we had a website module and a membership module and a scheduling module and an attendance module. And so you could decide which things you wanted. But the first steps in turning that into a reality, it was a pretty big leap. It's interesting to go from a company that builds products for other people then to build your own product is actually a really different paradigm shift because we're the ones who had to come up with what are the business problems and what's the approach to solving it, like how much of this problem were we going to solve, which of these problems are we going to solve, was a bit of a shift. Like before we were more of a development shop where they would come to us and say, this is the business problem, how would you go about fixing that? So we had to learn a lot just from our own customers and from the people early on to say, what are the actual problems we should be solving? Which sounds pretty easy, but the reality is that a lot of people have a hard time articulating what their real problems are. So we would have
I
people
agree.
come, we would talk to lots of people and say, well, we would have these existing nonprofit customers and everybody had a different theory on like how to best do volunteering. And so it was really hard to figure out who's right. Like even people
Yeah.
who are doing things really well, they have like big, robust programs, may not have been doing that in a way that actually was really good for everyone or even good for themselves. It was just the way they did it. And it worked for them, but it wasn't necessarily a universal. So I think early on, trying to figure out what the universals were kind of a challenge.
Well, you were in a unique position because you were working with so many different organizations that like you were able to pull out the common problems. I think that's super cool. And that's where our recipe that we talk about comes from, right? It comes from all that research you did early on and like it's continuous research as we go on today working with nonprofits, but it's our recipe for an extraordinary volunteer program. And right, I feel like that's just the origin of it. But
I think honestly,
um,
what it was a lot of, we really had to get the business to a certain mass to be able to distill what that recipe actually was. Like it's kind of
mm,
like a chicken and an egg problem where it kind of hurt us early on that we made the product do everything our customers asked it to do. So if let's say, just for round number sake, we have 100 customers and all of them have a slightly different way of doing things and what feels like a valid reason for doing it differently. And so the product in the early days was able to do it 100 different ways. And it took a lot of listening to figure out what were like I said, what were the universals. And it wasn't until you get to a certain mass where you can actually see it and be able to
yeah.
say, okay, if we take those 100 different things and go, you know what, really these 30 are all the same thing. They're all just like handling it slightly differently, some of them better than others. And in some cases, there may have been a 101st way of doing it that actually was better for everybody. So like there was a lot of that going on in the beginning.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
So okay, let's talk about, was there ever a moment where you were like, uh-oh, what did we get ourselves into when you were starting the business? And what were those
Um,
challenges?
I would say probably every day for the first 3 years we started. Well, and I'll tell you the reason why is that we used to get very large projects. And so somebody would come to us and they'd say, here's $500,000 and we need to build this thing. Right. And we would go, oh, okay, great. And we would have $500,000 to build that. And we might have, 4 or 5 or 6 of those projects going on simultaneously. And, so it's just a different kind of animal than saying, oh, we're going to have, at the time when we first started off, our subscriptions were very small, like the dollar amounts. We started out with smaller nonprofits, paying less money, more of them paying less money every month. And so switching the gears around to saying, what do you give somebody whose budget is $55 a month or $100 a month? Like, what do you, this is just a very different dynamic. And so we lost a lot of money in the first few years, like a ton of money. I mean, not even the first few. In the first decade, we lost a ton of money. Like we didn't pay ourselves anything, and fortunately, we were in the position to absorb that. But like we were getting paid way less than anybody that was working for us, and we had a lot of customers that it wasn't their fault. We weren't at the scale yet where the business actually supported the level that the product needed to be in order to help these customers. So like the general idea is if you have 1,000 people paying you, $100 a month, you're in pretty good shape. But what happens between 0 and 1,000 is a lot of losing money. And we were bootstrapped, like we weren't funded. We didn't have a capital investment firm or anything else. So basically in those first few years, we were just going without, we were working. My brother and co-founder and I were working like ridiculous hours, 7 days a week, and getting paid half of what we were getting paid in a couple of years prior, or even less than half. And so, yeah, there was a lot of times when we were thinking to ourselves early on, like, what did we get ourselves into? But the thing that sort of pushed us through was we were really enjoying helping these organizations that otherwise wouldn't be able to afford these types of solutions. That if any one of them had come to us and said, we need this thing, we'd have been like, okay, you need $500,000. And some of these nonprofits, that would be their entire annual budget. So that obviously wouldn't have been feasible.
Wow. Okay, so tell me a little bit about the different milestones that you hit along the way. So those, different growth points. Yeah, like the major ones that you're super proud of.
Oh, I would say that our first our first big conference that we went to, and we came away with 30 new customers at that first big conference.
Wow.
That was a huge high for us, and that was 21 years ago. So we were like, okay, we're on to something. There's a real need for this, and that was sort of these things where you're like, okay, if we build this thing, if we keep moving forward with this, there's a real appetite for this, and the organizations that we would be helping are really, really cool organizations. So I think that was a big, nice confirmation early on. I think that the biggest one was, I mentioned that when we first started out, we were Closerware and we had all these modules, and it's really kind of adorable when I look back on it, because we named all of them something plus. So we had Website Plus and Member Plus and Shift Plus and Attendance Plus and Register Plus. We had all these pluses. And so a nonprofit would come along and they would pick which ones they wanted. And a major milestone was when we really realized that we were too many things to too many people. So, we were handling, at that point in time, we were handling a nonprofit's website, event registrations, donor tracking, membership tracking, volunteer schedules, volunteer attendance, online shopping carts. I mean, we were doing everything, and we were spread so thin that when we really decided we wanted to grow the business, it was stunting our growth in essence. We were doing too many things in too many different directions. And we just bit the bullet and said, we need to focus on one area where we think we can make the biggest impact, where we think that we have the most unique value proposition in the space. And that's when we actually decided on volunteer engagement. And there was there's like a personal connection to it too, because my mom was very big into volunteering. She had us volunteering when we were very, very young. And so there was a personal connection there. My brother and I were both very much personally impacted by volunteers as kids growing up. And so we kind of saw this, there was good personal alignment there, and there was good business alignment because we really felt like we had something to offer in this specific segment. And so when we made the shift and said, we're going to really focus on volunteer engagement and do that better than anybody else in the space. And we can't be distracted by, getting into donor management and membership management and event registrations and online shopping and all this other craziness. And that was a major turning point in the business when we actually saw a leap forward in growth, and that was really kind of a major milestone. I think another one was when we realized that we were really good at more things on the enterprise or professional end of the spectrum. So we moved into volunteer management, but then we were still trying to be all things to all people in the segment. So like we didn't want to turn away the smallest of volunteer programs, but we also were still very good at very high volume volunteering as well. And I think another turning point was just a few years ago when we said, we're really good at volunteering at scale. So if you have hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of volunteers, we're really good at that. If you have dozens or maybe even hundreds of administrators across an organization, like there aren't products out there that do that as well as we do. And so we sort of had to realign the product, its pricing, all of it to say, you know what, we can help small nonprofits that have 100 volunteers, absolutely, but it is typically going to be with ones who have big plans for the future, like they're looking to grow. Or they have 100 volunteers, but they have like super complex processes that they need solved. Or they have 100 volunteers that are, all almost like staff. So it's like managing a full-time staff of 100 people. And so we kind of had to let go of the fighting for very small volunteer organizations. Instead, we said, we need to embrace the idea that we handle big problems really well and at scale. So I would say those two were major inflection points for the business.
Cool. Okay, a few more questions
Okay.
for you. So what's your vision for the future of Volunteer Matters? Big question.
Okay. Yeah, so this is a good one. So yeah, I think that the thing that I'm focusing on next is, and there's been sort of a shift in the nonprofit space that I've seen, especially post-COVID, where this is a good outcome, in my opinion, was that, I'll talk about the bad first. COVID decimated a lot of nonprofit organizations. Some of them, it helped them to flourish because there were new needs as a result of the pandemic where people were like, you know what, we have more food insecurity, we have more homelessness, we have more mental health issues, and therefore there's going to be these resources and stuff dedicated to them. But to a lot of other ones, especially facility-based nonprofit organizations like museums and zoos and YMCAs and anybody who needed people to get together in order, to deliver on their mission, it was severely impacted, and in a massive financial way too. And the financial help from the government was slow to come to nonprofits. And sometimes you had nonprofits with a lot of employees. And so the help that was there for small businesses didn't apply to them. And then you had to fight to go get it. And so they got severely wounded through the pandemic financially. On top of everything else, in more recent years with inflation and individual donations going down, there's been this revitalization on the efficiencies of nonprofits. How can we actually do business better? And when I say business, I mean business, and nonprofits seeing themselves as a business. We have marketing, we have sales, we have We have to deliver on a product. Like it is a business. It sounds like a dirty word, like to go out there and and to market your vision, but it's what is necessary. And I see mid-size and even larger nonprofits looking at things a little bit differently, saying we need to be much more efficient at the way that we're doing things. And so, and this is a fantastic thing. It's actually helped us a lot because people start seeing things like, we need to be managing these volunteers with fewer staff. We need the costs involved with bringing in volunteers and training them and background checking them. We need to be better at making sure we retain them so that we can, operationally, we need to be much more efficient. So from that perspective, I feel like that's been a very good side effect. So the vision is really on how do you demonstrate the value from a monetary sense in volunteerism. So one of our trickiest things has been, everybody feels anecdotally the value of a volunteer program. Like there are things that we couldn't hire people to do. Like the money to hire them would make this, impossible. So we kind of know that. And then there are these other elements to it that we kind of know, like these are our best supporters, our volunteers. They love us. They donate to us. I know that. Right. And so my thought for the future, at least for the next year or two, that we're really focusing on is how do you tie the financial impact of volunteerism to the organization directly and indirectly. And so by directly, I mean, who of our volunteers are donating? How much are they donating? Do they donate more than non-volunteers? How are we having hard numbers surrounding this? Because these are going to be the metrics to determine how much we continue to invest in volunteering and how much we continue to promote it. The other vision, which has sort of been, this has been something that's been evolving for a while, is just the idea that we need to make volunteering easier for people. And the numbers of volunteer hours have been declining, but the numbers of volunteers participating has been increasing. And so, like with everything else in our world, we have to make it easy in order for it to make it feasible. You have too many people where we have dual working families. Our seniors are working later and later into their lives. They have less disposable income and time. Like it's not that uncommon for a 65-year-old to be working, for a 70-year-old to be working. And we used to rely on those retired volunteers to make up the bulk of the hours of volunteering because they had more time in their hands, and they have actually not as much time as they used to. So both from getting younger volunteers and getting older volunteers, we better make it very easy for volunteers to get in and get out and to make a difference. And what we want to do is we will encourage more people to participate and not rely on overburdening any one volunteer with too many hours. So that's really the shift that's been happening. Like since we started 21 years ago, that shift was already happening. It's only getting to be more and more. And so our customers have been with us for a long time. They saw this a long time ago, and they're actually in a really good state there. They have like very healthy programs with things that are well-defined. Volunteers can get in and onboarded and making an impact very quickly. The experience is easy on them. They can fit it into their lives a lot easier. We have more bite-sized and virtual type of volunteering. And then in the end, on the business side of things, we could actually relate that to the actual real financial impact of volunteering on behalf of the organization. That was a mouthful.
I love it. I'm excited for the future.
Me too.
Okay, well, last question. If you could give one message to all of our customers, what would it be?
You're awesome. And I joke about this all the time, but I'm also dead serious about it, is that we are only as good as we are because our customers are awesome and we completely rip them off on a daily basis. So the message to all of my customers are to continue to communicate with us. So we have two things: continue to communicate and always be thinking about how things can get better and let us know. So we are very intentional about communicating with our customers. So we have practices where we quarterly get together with our largest customers and biannually with our mid-sized customers. And we also have tracking via our customer service and ticket-based systems for people who are saying, hey, we would love to see this new feature. Um, and so that level of communication back to us to that we can continue to learn about what's emerging, what the new um, business problems are, we'll call them, and how we can help. Like, we are such a valuable resource to be able to be one of the people that help. Just today, we were on with a major university, and we were just having a conversation, and it came out that interviewing volunteers was a huge problem for them. And they hadn't thought to like contact us to have a conversation about that. It just happened to come up in conversation because we keep this dialogue running. And we were like, oh, we're actually been looking into integrating with two different services that do interview automation. And they were like, oh my God, that's great. So we ended up having this great dialogue about the two products we were looking into, that both of them integrate with Workday, which is the system that they use for HR. And so that they also might use those in the employee side of what they do. So there was some synergy there. So always be thinking about if again, I'm communicating to our customers, thinking about how we can help because we want to help. So anything that touches on volunteering, talk to us about, let us know about, let your voice be heard, because we're constantly looking to evolve and grow.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate the feedback. So,
Big time.
well, thank you, Mark. Thanks for letting me grill you with all these questions, and
I
it was
love it.
fun to get to know you more
We should
and the
make this a
company
regular
more.
good to
There's
get to
so
know me.
much more to go into. I mean, seriously, it should be a weekly thing.
Yeah, this is easy for me, asking me questions and just letting me talk. I love to talk, so
All
not a
right.
problem for me. All right.
Well, we'll see you all next time.
All right. Thanks,
All
everybody.
right. Thanks.
Bye.